Alright, 1854. The box comes with both 44 and 54. We'll touch 44 later. But I've been playing a bunch of 54. This is my third time playing. First time for a full solitaire game. First time for a full game. And I played Opposed. I should be playing Opposed again, I think, at the end of this month. That's the group I played with. Really want another chance at it. Hoping to get a finished full game. What is it? I mean, obviously an 18xx game. It's shows the 1830 roots very, very clearly. The train falls, etc. of the core game feel a lot like an 1830 clone almost. It adds a bunch of neat little shit on top of that, though. For one thing, it takes 1835's concept of minor companies, which other games have done. Notably, 2038 also uses them. But instead of them being big money makers in this game, they're okay. They're not big early money makers. And then late in the game, they don't dump into something where they're useless. So they actually, like the Prussian, which you can make the Prussian work. That's not the question. The thing is, your shared working, the corporation that comes out of it is almost guaranteed to not be all yours, and you've got special rules restricting what you can do with it and all kind of stuff like that. Instead here, it kind of smooths things out. They're not quite as good at the beginning of the game, and they actually become a strong certificate at the end of the game. Whatever your minor company is, turns into half of a local major company, which is kind of a funky thing because it can run on very little money. It can buy obsolete trains fairly cheap. It can run 2 trains coming out of Vienna and make boatloads of money for both people. Its stock values increase, and it has very little to worry about. There are ways to make it worry, but we didn't see it in the game that I played, and I don't know. They'd be hard to do, which is to force the 4 train out on that side. It's a lot of money. That's the main reason. You kind of have to swallow to do it, and that's a tough call. What else does it do that's kind of funky? Well, it has this little mini map, which is just weirdness. It's like embedded in the map, but doesn't have any real effect on the map. And it's just a way to run your minor companies. So that's one of the other things. The miners don't give you any power on the main map. By the time they come out as local majors, the map's decided. They're just fighting for their little slice of that map. But the main track lays have been done. So they don't get that powerful position that they do in 35, where they get to build out the track that your other company needs or whatever. They're also not busy dotting the map until they come on. Speaking of the map is kind of challenging. Maybe not as challenging as Switzerland. A lot of terrain you have to pay for on it, and this is also true on the minor. And some areas you can't even go through except by running tunnels, which is another of the interesting things. You can blast through any terrain pretty much for $100 and just lay track, and you can ignore the towns and la la la. Some people are very unhappy with the tunnels because they can make some track lays impossible. And some of those track lays can be very, very important in the game. I played without any house rules to restrict that. And the more I look at it, somebody can abuse them, but I don't think it's financially it's usually going to be in someone's best interest to do it. Because basically what you're doing is you change the parameters of the game. Hey, look, I think it's the FJ or whatever, can't start. Okay, well, I guess nobody's going to buy shares of it now. What about if you set yourself up in a position where you can block its start? Well, you've invested some track lays that probably aren't too good for your companies in setting yourself up to ensure that you get the company, right? Now somebody else starts it, and yeah, they're asking for you to lop their head off, right? Probably the most worrisome is the minor spaces. What happens if you can't lay either of these tracks due to tunnels? And basically, if there's 2 tunnels in one of these hexes, it's not going to be able to be placed, period, the end. That is a more disturbing possibility. I'm still willing to say, look, if somebody gets no miners and they want to screw the miners over, that's a viable strategy. And it's a strong reason to prevent someone from maybe bidding on 2 miners. Because if you're all in the same boat playing on here, you're not going to be taking that kind of strategy. That one I have to think about a little harder, because the other one the other hex, I feel has significant controls on it. But this is kind of baked in. A number of the starting players are going to have minor companies. Some of them are going to be in good position. Some of them maybe not such good position, so it doesn't hurt them as much to lose the minor. And if somebody doesn't get a minor at all, they can just destroy that. Now, it's an expensive way to destroy it, but hey, now you've sealed that company off so it can't run. It depends on how you play the rules, I think. Because sealing that company off so it can't run, in either case, makes more sense if you allow for situations with the more 1830 provision for whether or not a company needs to buy a train. The rules as written that come in the Mayfair edition, Mayfair Lookout, don't seem to imply that a company can avoid buying a train. Notably, if you have no run, it doesn't have an exclusion for that. The online resource that I was able to find arguments or statements that indicated some other rules ambiguities that are left in here, or omissions or whatever, states that you can cut them off and they don't have to buy a train, and you can have and then this would be based not on this edition but on the earlier edition of the game, that you can have a company that simply doesn't run. It'll go back in value all the time, but hey, look at all that money I got. I'll buy I'll buy a useless train with it and use it for one of my other corporations. Your call on that. Actually, the rules to this one are probably its weakest point. There are ambiguities in it. There are possibly omissions. There are definite issues with the rule book in this particular one. I hear 1844 has a stronger rule book. And it's kind of a pity, because there's a lot of interesting stuff this one's trying to do, but it doesn't really nail everything down, like with the tunnels. There are a lot of things you could do. You could make up house rules about certain hexes. Or you could decide to reverse the rules and say, you know what, it's okay to build on top of a tunnel if you have track on top of it. Now that looks horrible when you try doing it, and it creates like a weird junction point, which you'd have to start explaining everything. The end game. Obviously, at some point or another, someone decided the game ends at 300. It's apparently, if I recall correctly, from the original game. It's on there. Okay, but it's not in the rule book in this one. I don't think it's in the rule book in the original, but it's certainly not in the rule book in this one. The end game conditions are spelled out. They don't include that. There are other places where, you know, on the minor map, there's a graphic that looks kind of like a mountain, and there's no cost associated with it. There may be one that even has a terrain symbol. I seem to remember, maybe on the other side. I seem to remember something that I looked at and said, wow, there's like a little terrain symbol, but there's no cost associated with it. Oh, no. I know what it is. It's this, which has both a mountain and a water symbol, but only the cost for mountain, and that's kind of weird. And likewise with this has a water symbol, even though the water's way over here. None of that actually affects play, but it does lead you to feel like there wasn't a lot of consideration or play testing going on, where people looked at the proposed final graphics and said, yeah, you know, there's something weird going on here. What about the special subsystems? Let's take a look at them. So first of all, your private companies. You have privates, minors, and majors, and the local majors. The private companies, you can't sell them to your corporations, which means you don't get piles of money into your corporations. And they all allow you to build track for free in a space, i.e. avoid the terrain cost. And each one, I believe, has a bonus, which generally is flip the card over to use this one-time bonus for one of your companies. A couple of them instead come with 20% of corporations that probably will start in most games fairly early, just because if it's easier to float it on less shares, then you have piles of money on this corporation, and that's kind of cool. The number of the local railways, we've already kind of talked about them. They're very, very constrained in terms of what they can do and what kind of, you know, they have their own special trains that they can run and their own money. I'm going to take a break on this and get another pipe. And those constraints are why you can't really make a whole shitload of money off them. Also, the fact that you can trade trains with your major companies, but you're not using the same trains. So you can't really usually have a major ditch the trains that it doesn't need onto your minor, and then your minor becomes awesome. What you have to do is you have to spend money from your major that it really can ill afford and buy a train for the minor if you want to do that. You can also do that the opposite way. The minor can buy a train for your major. And then your minor, which is really good late in the game, as we saw, they all made good money. Well, unless it's buddied up with someone with cash, it's going to be pretty emasculated. Now that's okay. So here's the thing. The 1 and the 6 are particularly interesting, because everything else has no assurances, right? If the 1 and the 2 merge together, the 1 will be the president. If the 1 and anything merge together, the 1 will be the president. If the 6 and anything merge together, the 6 will not be the president. So, if you have no money on your minor railway, the 6 is the one to, if you're planning on raping your minor railway, the 6 is the one to take. If you want a good running railway, the 1 may be the one to take. Simply because, well, whoever you merge with, you're going to get the presidency. And if you've got decent money on it, you want to be able to use that, I guess. you're also going to have a lot of capability to cut deals, to make your merger with someone else. But the problem there is, like, the 1 and the 2 might look back and say, well, I'd rather be president. It all depends on the location of the companies on the board. For example, the guy owning the 2, if he has a railway that's not near Vienna as his other railway, well, he probably doesn't care too much about controlling those track lays. On the other hand, if the 1 and the 2 are both involved in the Vienna area, then they might want to seek other partners. They'll default together if need be, but they might want to seek other partners for merging, assuming everything else is equal. You still want to go with somebody who has, an advantage in cash there, because the bigger train you can buy, the better it is. The majors themselves have something really interesting about them. They start off with double size shares, 40% presidency, 20% other shares. There's this really interesting dynamic of when you want to cross the line on the stock chart. Now I've put everything away, so I'm not going to dig it all back out, but you can look at the playthrough and the rules intro, and I explain it there. That choice can be fairly important for a couple of reasons. One is you can hold a high percentage of your company. Well, you can hold 100%, but you can hold a lot of percent of your company on fewer certificates, which means you don't rise above the certificate limit as easily for a long time and make good money off that. And if you're banging up against your certificate limit, you don't want your companies to necessarily cross that line. There's also a timing issue in terms of which operating round. You want to cross that line on your last operating round, because you get it doesn't help the company more either way for it to cross it earlier, but you get your cash payout when you can immediately start investing it in stocks, and you get all the runs off of it. Now, in order to time that correctly, you may have to swallow once, and then that's a hard choice. Do you want to, reduce your overall stock value for that company in the long run? You'll get the same amount back in cash. This also gives you the option to play options, which is a mechanism that I think works tolerably well in the game in terms of a historical analogy. Basically, you're able to buy a 20% share by paying for a 10% share. And you only have the 10% share, but on your next operating round, you have to, on your next stock round, before you buy anything else, you have to make a decision on whether to sell that one share that you have and the corresponding option for its face value currently, or buy at the price that you bought the first 10%, the rest of that 20% certificate. The reason it works tolerably well is you're locked in at a price, and there is an opportunity cost to not buying that option. If you don't take the option, you're not just charged an amount of money for the option, as would, a more detailed system would do. But if you have to sell the remaining share that doesn't have the option, that's your opportunity cost. It's not exactly a correspondence with reality there, but it probably reflects reality fairly. It comes close enough, okay, as an abstraction. So that's the other thing. When you cross that line, all your old shares, the stock splits. Well, 50% of the company is now back in the company's hands, and it's available for purchase from the company treasury. You pay to the company treasury, which means there's this huge influx of cash late in the game for most of these companies. In some cases, it's right when you need to get a permanent train. In some cases, it's after when you needed to get a permanent train, and it might be able to fuel, especially if you have two companies, might be able to fuel you getting another permanent train. On the other hand, it might just fuel an insatiable desire to build tunnels and to dot everything up. This game tends to have a big clutter of dots at the end of the game because people have boatloads of money and they can slice each other's territory out. Also has mail contracts. There's no other way to get cash into your company through normal operations. You don't get a percentage of the initial offering or the bank pool or anything like that. You either swallow or you pay out. If you pay out, your corporation gets nothing. Well, you have the opportunity to invest some money, usually early in the company's life, in getting a regular revenue. And it takes several turns to pay off at any stage in the game. But eventually it gives you this flow of operating expenses that allow you to buy your tokens, that allow you to buy tunnels and blast through mountains and all that kind of stuff. But nowhere near the speed that you want to be able to do it. But if you buy it early, either one, you make good money off of it in the long run. What's kind of funny is the $200, you have two flavors, $100 and $200 mail run. The $200 one starts the game making a higher proportion of money, but as the game proceeds, it's making less of an income back on it. However, it still makes up once it's made up its cost, it's still giving you more cash on each payout, which is kind of a big thing. So you have to make your choices there. That's about it. My feeling overall on this one is that it overlooking the rules issues, you'll be able to come to an agreement with your friends, your playmates, whatever, as to how the game, how the game should be played, what the actual rules are. There are a few little mechanical things that got in the way. One of them notably is the upgrade cities, the brown and gray upgrade cities, all have a missing side on them. Now this is a neat little feature which allows you to play a track where, it allows you to handle all cities the same in the game. Basically anywhere where you want to play track, there's at most one missing space, one missing side. The negative to all that is it's really hard to see that missing side on the board. I screwed that up a couple of times. And it's hard to justify what that missing side's there for if you're in the middle of, an area where you can connect to everything next to you under a normal XX game. What I'd suggest instead is to make that missing side optional. Allow again, this is a house rule, and I probably wouldn't play with it. But I think it would avoid causing some problems. It's just too easy, and there's no real reason why this fully upgraded city doesn't let you in this space. You can make a reasonable argument for, but then again, all of XX has this problem in terms of the track lays. But you can make a reasonable argument for, very seldomly do you go into all six sides of a city. Yeah, but players are going to place that blank side so it screws someone. And that starts becoming less understandable than, and you could say they're managing to control the property rights, whatever. You can make up any kind of hand waving argument you like in XX because it's not that great a simulation. So the main problem I have with it is visibility, is that those disappear, and your preconceived notion of an XX game is, oh yeah, I'll be able to connect to that. So that's one problem. Another, the mail runs, the minor companies, just the total number of companies at the end, even you have 9 companies at the end, they end up making it a lot of mechanical cash transactions going on. Usually all the corporations aren't out when the privates are out, and you're having to diddle around with money that much. You have to do more in this one, and that at least for me, helped cause some errors. That's one thought on it. Anyway, my overall view is that this is, well, maybe not in the top tier of games, in the sense that it's not one that I'm going to look at and say, wow, is this my favorite XX game? Okay? But it's in that next tier, which is pretty solid games. Again, overlooking rules and a couple of other little issues. Pretty solid games that look like they're going to have a fair amount of replay to them, as much as you need if you're an XX collector. It's not a great choice, 54 at least, for a starting person to the system. I would suggest, let's see, well, certainly 30 is a good choice. The AL and GAR, but they're too watered down. At least one of them, the one that I played, is too watered down to really be worth doing. 1889 is a good choice. I think 1860 was a good choice. The one that's coming out from GMT, which I have pre-ordered, 46 or whatever, that looks like it would play pretty well for a starting game. This one's not terrible. It's not one that's just really hard to decipher, but it adds a few layers on. And those layers may actually end up hindering replay. The idea there being, it may just be that certain configurations of starting packets may just be too strong. Now, see, in 1830, you can look at something like the Camden and Amboy and say, wow, you can drop that into your company, it's worth a lot of money. But everybody at the table eventually knows it's worth a lot more than it's valued at. Here, everyone, a particular minor or perhaps private becomes significantly more valuable to one player than to others, which means he can bid it up and they really can't afford to. And that's kind of the trick there, I guess. Anyway, from what I can see of it, though, it doesn't look like it has any really huge flaws once you can kind of hammer out what you're going to do about the tunnels and the special spaces and what exactly the rules mean in a couple of places. So, certainly a better deal than buying the, old Deep Thought or whoever put these suckers out earlier. Mass production came up with really good components and a pretty good deal on two games. We'll see about how good a game 44 is, but I've heard good things about it.